Okay, I just pushed the the record button. Thank you everyone to joining our webinar today. It's my pleasure to have it in our webinar. The topic we will cover today is related to media and information literate youth. The subtopic is a cornerstone to implementing access to information policies in SEE region. So in the beginning, I will just make a short introduction to our webinar, and before that, I will just make a short remark to every panelists. We were talking about that earlier, but just now that everybody is here, please keep your microphone muted unless you speak. When you are speaking, don't forget to just start your microphone so that everybody can have a clear connection to the Zoom application. So for the start, I will just make a few sentences about this occasion. So on this occasion of the IDUAI and Global MIL Week 2020, UNESCO organizes this webinar about youth's crucial role in implementing access to information policies and media information literacy policies in SEE region. And to ensure that the youth fulfills this role, in particular in times of global COVID-19 crisis and pandemic, their empowerment through media and information literacy to think critically about the information they receive and awareness about their rights to know is a crucial importance, not only for development as citizens, but also their country's democratic future. And youth can be catalysts to promote and engage in the positive appropriation of information, media, and technology, especially because the media and the culture they mediate are an integral part of their growth. So before introductory remarks, and just to let everybody know, the introductory remarks will be given by Mr. Krasimir Nikolov, head of the political department of the EU delegation in Sarajevo, and Mr. Sinisa Sheshum, head of UNESCO Sarajevo office. But before that, Monica will play a brief video for us for 2 minutes. So Monica, you can play. Okay, thank you, Monica. I think it seems something wrong with the audio, but it's not a big deal for this video because it's text oriented, so it's not the problem. And after this short video, I will call Mr. Krasimir Nikolov, as I said, the head of the political department of the EU delegation in Sarajevo, to address us in 2 to 4 minutes max to say hello to everybody and to give this webinar a much more importance. So Krasimir Nikolov, you have you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I'm very glad to be part of this webinar. It's really a very good initiative. Moreover, it is a regional event. And being given 2 to 4 minutes, I become fully aware how expensive is media time. So I'll try to be brief indeed. I'm very glad that you have this perspective of discussion, building and enhancing media literacy. And this is a very important for our work, and I'm very glad that you will have such a discussion, because in our work with authorities in the countries of the Western Balkans, we have a similar agenda. We speak about free access of information. We speak about media freedom and freedom of expression. These are fundamental concepts and fundamental requirements that all Western Balkan countries must adhere to. This is an essential part of their path towards European Union membership. This is important both for young people, for all citizens, and I am very happy to try to kick off the discussion in your seminar in this way. I see a very important challenge here. You young people are particularly sensitive about a very important mix of different level playing fields. On one hand, this is the established political organization of societies, where you are citizens of your countries, and you have rights, fundamental rights as citizens. On the other hand, there is the global media and virtual sphere, where communication, contacts, exchange of views cross over the borders of states. We have to straddle this mix, and in our work we have to promote the principles of political organization on the basis of democratic principles and values, so that they can cope with the challenges of the contemporary global world. I will become a bit boring now, because I will need to refer to our official policy, which is, as I said, on promotion of legislation in Western Balkan countries that establishes free access to information. We are trying to push governments at all levels to first develop the legislation, second implement and enforce it, and be accountable to the citizens in that process. For example, here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are doing a very interesting exercise to have a kind of a model law, which is applied first to Brčko district, so that in the future it can be used, and it can serve as an example for other levels of government. Another point that I would like to make is about freedom of expression and media freedom. This is a very important indicator of the readiness of Western Balkan countries to become part of the EU. It implies commitment to democracy, to good governance, and to political accountability. This is something that we monitor regularly, and the last package of country reports that was published 2 weeks ago is a testimony to this. When it comes to press freedom in these countries, there is a variety of rating, but I must say that all countries of the region have much more to be desired in terms of freedom of expression and freedom of the press, in accordance to the World Press Freedom Index. I will be very glad to hear your discussion, at least partially, and I'm ready to participate. I wish you all the good arguments, questions, answers, so that you have a fruitful exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krasimir. So I now give the floor to Sinisha Sheshun just to shortly introduce us with the project we are currently conducting. So Sinisha, give us a few words.
Thank you, Borislav. Good morning to everyone. I'm really pleased to be here with you this morning, and I wish to greet, both Mr. Nikolov and Mr. Matar, representatives of EU delegation here in Sarajevo, because EU as the donor to this initiative is extremely important partner of UNESCO. But I also use this opportunity to really warmly, thank and greet, all speakers, which are, from our point of view, champions in promoting MIL within our region. And I will just name them all. I will name, the Minister Krivic, Minister of Education, Science and Youth of Sarajevo Canton, and I really thanking him, for allowing for the reserving some time to be with us here today this morning, because I know besides his very busy schedule and all challenges he is having with COVID-19 education system. I wish to also greet Professor Turcilo, Mrs. Fezic, Mr. Janic, Mr. Hazizaj, Mr. Vukovic, and Mrs. Adilovic. I'm extremely proud to greet you on behalf of UNESCO at the webinar Media and Information Literate Youth, a cornerstone to implementing access to the information policies in Southeastern Europe. The webinar is organized as a part of UNESCO EU-funded project entitled Building Trust in Media in Southeast Europe and Turkey, and this is its second phase, that among others aims to pilot MIL in formal and informal education in the region and to address the surge of disinformation in the region. The webinar is also to mark the International Day for Universal Access to Information and the Global Media and Information Literacy Week of 2020. Besides all efforts of the authorities and partners across the region, and in addition to various legal frameworks and strategies developed or set, the lack of awareness on the importance of MIL is still very evident. Still ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, besides all negative aspects and horrifying socioeconomic impact, a part of all challenges bringing a wider attention on the importance of MIL. This should be used as an opportunity, as MIL is not yet another campaign, but an important segment of education systems, and more importantly, a tool which is to further enhance position of youth within societies. UNESCO is hoping that today's webinar will, along with all actions being undertaken under joint UNESCO EU initiative, lead the change for youth to act as leaders and co-creators of media and information literacy to build youth resilience against disinformation. Looking forward listening your addresses and presentation, I wish you very successful webinar.
Thank you, Sinisha. And because I got the information that our minister, Mr. Anis Krivic, is in hurry, he's in hurry, I can give the word firstly to him, and then we will continue with the introductions and another video. So, Mr. Krivic, if you are ready, you can give us the short messages right now, if you're able.
Hello, I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really sorry. So I had meeting in the other room, which is really important, but also I'm happy that I'm able to also I think that generally, I would like to thank Mr. Sheshum for inviting me and all the organizers, UNESCO, and I would like to say hello to all the participants. How much time I have?
You have 3-4 minutes to address this. So
yes, okay. So generally, I think that this is a perfect time to have these topics and to talk about them and to do some actions regarding our today's topic. In Canton Sarajevo, we have experienced really huge change in the minds of people included in education. We have experienced very nice reform of the education system, which can be used in the aims of today's topic. I think that this is a point where we should all use it in the right way. A lot of problems that I have experienced and that I have solved
I think we lost the connection.
are good that we think we should have. And what? I can hear you and I can see you.
Okay, we just lost the connection for a couple of seconds, so you can continue.
Oh, okay. So in Canton Sarajevo, at this point, we have this topic is in some way somehow imaginary. So if you want to inform, I call it MIL. So if you want to inform, to make it rule for real, then you need to take a lot of actions. So COVID-19, one of the positive things happened by COVID-19 is that in Canton Sarajevo we have really raised the usage of the online education, distance learning, and the students, parents, teachers have changed the concept of teaching. This is something that we see every day. It is really related to MIL because parents need to read, to find information which are really important for their children as pupils, and to be able to fulfill the obligations regarding the school. So this has raised the level of the usage of the information and the way how they participate, how they perceive those informations. We have some very after all these problems solved, and after all teachers have turned into the online distance learning, and after they have experienced it since March, now we can feel that teachers are tired. Teachers are all the time. Teachers are tired, and I need to motivate teachers in order so they can proceed with the education. So main challenge at this point is to maintain the educational system. Besides actions that we have did in order to raise the teachers' competence, is that we organize webinars tightly connected to MIL, okay? So they are learning techniques how to teach. But before you adopt a new technique on how to teach, you need to adopt technique how to use how to read information among a lot of information, a lot of lessons. And at the end, teachers should be able to teach the student also. We are working on various projects related to MIL, Media and Information Literacy. We are working on it unconsciously also for some actions. And I think that this is a perfect timing for us to start with the real valuable projects, because everybody knows now that ordinary schools are perfect, but we need to go in March 15. I hope that next year at this time we will be talking about different problems which are on different level. Now I have some basic problems, like they do not have internet connection, they don't have laptops, but those problems are being solved one by one, step by step. Hopefully this project also will definitely help our society. We'll follow it up as a Minister of Education, Youth and Science of Canton Sarajevo. We'll always be ready and happy to give a win for this kind of projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anis. And I realize that you have other obligations. So if you are interested, you always can get the recording of this session, so you can check it out in your free time and give us feedback on some questions. So we will continue with this webinar. Now I will introduce the other panelists. After Mr. Anis Krivic, we have Leila Točilo. She's professor at the University of Sarajevo. We have also Alma Fejzic from Center for Development of Youth Activism in BNH. Stefan Janic from Fake News Seeker, or on our language Tragač, from Serbia. Mr. Altin Hazizaj from Child Rights Center from Albania. Mr. Uglješa Vukovic, he's from Transparency International in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Mrs. Emina Adilovic, she is information expert and researcher on the projects in Faculty of Political Sciences in Sarajevo. But after we start the session, we have another video to share with you in this moment. So Monica, you can start it.
Što se tiče teorije zavere i kada bi ih slušao, ja bih došao do jednog zaključka da je ceo moj život u suštini teorija zavere. To jest da sam ja samo projekat vanzemaljskog deteta i stojim mu negde u sobi.
Obično koristim internet za informisanje. Internet u vidu internetskih portala na koje konkretno odim i prikupljam informacije ili nešto što je oglašeno na Facebooku, Instagramu, Twitteru ili drugim društvenim mrežama.
Društvene mreže u današnje vrijeme zaista jesu osnovni izvor informacija, osobito za mlade ljude. Moje mišljenje jeste da se mladi danas najviše informišu sa društvenih mreža, zatim sa YouTube kanala i najzad sa internet portala.
Za informacije najčešće koristim internet, društvene mreže.
Većina Bošnjaka i većina mladih ljudi pristupa informacija preko društvenih mreža ili preko internet portala.
Običajno je to putem interneta. Во последно време обично ги добивам информациите преку интернет.
Bošnjaci, ja najviše pronalazim informacije na internetu, pogotovo kako se online nastava.
Please listen carefully.
Naravno, društvene mreže nisu mjesto na kojem trebate tek tako zdravo za gotovo da uzimate informacije i postoji mnogo recimo sajtova koji se bave takozvanim fact-checkingom.
Ako su u pitanju neke važnije vesti, nešto što me interesuje lično, uglavnom ću se truditi da pronađem što više izvora, jer jednostavno jedan izvor vrlo često neće biti dovoljan i nikada ne treba verovati samo jednom izvoru.
Oslanjam se na to da razvijam kritičko razmišljanje i da na osnovu toga mogu da zaključim da li je ta informacija korektna ili nije.
Prosto zavisi od vrste informacije. Naravno, kada su u pitanju informacije koje se ističu u prvi plan, šok ili prosto velikim slovima naznačene, onda ću ići na dalju provjeru.
Borbe protiv lažnih vijesti bi trebalo da bude provjeravanje izvora, koliko su oni kredibilni, kako uopšte doći do kredibilnog izvora.
Ja, nažalost, nisam imao predmet medijska pismenost.
Definitivno medijska pismenost, to je broj 1 i da bude zastupljeno u obrazovanju i konstantno i da se uvijek priča o tome.
Medijska pismenost nije važna, ona je krucijalna za to kako ćemo koristiti medije ili da li će oni biti alat u našim rukama ili mi ćemo postati alat u njihovim rukama.
Ako od škola ne učat ubavo da debatirаме, не информираат убаво, мислам дека многу помалку проблеми ќе има кон нашата колку сме информирани.
Mladi su osuđeni sada se školuju preko interneta i može im dosta pomoći u životu.
Mislim da je izrazito važno i koliko je potrebno, toliko ga i nema, to kritičko razmišljanje mladih.
Veoma je važno još u mlađoj dobi razviti pojam kritičkog razmišljanja i da učenici od najmlađe dobi budu svjesni da sve što pročitaju, čuju i saznaju ne mora biti istina.
Jako treba biti obazriv s tim, jer opet kažem, informacije putuju brzo i taj jedan share, koliko je dobar, toliko je loš. Odnosno, koliko može da bude melem, toliko i posječe.
Možem da kažem od lično iskustvo дека како mlad човек што има преживеан рак, има многу работи кои што луѓето веруваат, но не се точни. Затоа само со едукација на луѓето може да се избегне погрешно мислење или радикализација или било што. Lažna vijest, manipulacija putem medija, propaganda.
Širenje dezinformacija.
Vijest za koju sumnjam da je lažna.
Danas je teško verovati sopstvenim očima na nečemu trećem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Monica, for sharing this video with us. So now we will resume with our discussion and with our panelists. So I just need to make a remark in the beginning. Every one of you got 5 to 7 minutes max for your answers on my first general question. So if you would not mind, I will interfere with your speech if I notice that we are short with time. So I hope that you don't mind for that. So just to have a equal time for everybody. So first I will give the word to Professor Leila Torcila to answer us, because she is directly involved in the problematics of access to information in BIH and this region. And I would like from her to give us a short overview of this practice from the perspective of the regulatory framework, and what are the biggest challenges to access to information implementation in the country. So Leila, you have your 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you, Borislav, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to talk about such an important topic. And yes, please do stop me after 5 to 7 minutes. That's always very tricky to give the floor to university professors, you know, who can speak endlessly for a long time. And of course, the topic or the question you raised when it comes to my discussion is quite important, and it's not easy to explain in a few seconds or a few minutes, but I'll try and do my best to do so. When it comes to general kind of perception on how we exercise the media freedom in free access to information in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I will start with a remark that actually I learned from Mr. Johannes Hahn, former representative in the region, who said that recently that in the whole region people are over-newsed but under-informed. In terms of access to information, as we've seen in your videos, our young people, especially if we focus on them, do have access to various information in general, but when it comes to building trust, that's the issue that we need to work much more closely and much more deeply. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the legal framework, if I focus on that, as in many other cases, is basically quite good on paper, but poorly implemented in practice. And that's not something new that I will say when I mention that. We adopted the law on free access to information now already 20 years ago. However, and we also changed it, I think 4 or 5 times so far in 2006, 2009, 2011, 2013. But what we have seen in the meantime, with all these changes on law on free access to information, is actually that institutions are trying to close rather than open up to citizens and journalists when it comes to transparency and building trust. Because these changes that were proposed, some of them were not adopted, luckily, were actually in favor of lack of transparency rather than transparency. Institutions try to sort of make a law in their favor, so to say, so that they don't have to develop a strong and transparent process of information sharing. For example, it was one of the changes that was proposed 7 years ago, was to exclude public interest tests. For example, to exclude opinion of ombudsman if the information is important to be shared publicly, to basically somehow exclude the fact that free access to information is basic human right. What we need to do now is actually develop a better understanding of this right among general public and of course among journalists as well. I come from journalism profession, so I focus on that as well. In order to make people aware that we do have regulatory framework, that we do have law that enables citizens and journalists to ask public authorities to share more information, more publicly important information. But we also need to make sure that we continuously and very carefully monitor all aspects or all parts of misuse and this ignorant attitude of public authorities, because the response to requests for information based on this law are very slow. People do not use this very often, ordinary people. Journalists mainly use it if they are doing an investigative long-term stories, and that's why the whole exercise of this law is not very well implemented in the country. I'll just briefly in 1 to 2 minutes just focus on youth, because that's our focus. I think that we need very strong campaigns in, for example, high schools as well as universities on the law itself, on the regulatory framework. We try to do so, of course, in journalism department with many courses in Sarajevo, the University of Sarajevo, and we try to do to inform young people on their right to exercise this law in our all our non-formal training programs with youth. But I think it's very important that people are informed on opportunities they have and they can use in order to get information they need from their authorities. And COVID crisis has proven how important all that is. We have seen so many misuses of information. Sure. We have seen all misuses of information all over the places, especially on the internet. So knowing how that you have an option to look and search and demand and ask for the proper information from public authority, and that's your human right, is something that we should promote all together throughout the country and the region, especially among youth. I'll stop there, and then of course we can discuss it later on.
Thank you, Professor Leila Turcilo. This would be a good context to our discussion later on. So now I will invite Mr. Stefan Janjic to address us with his experience with the problems related to access to information laws in Serbia from his perspective as young journalist and young assistant professor on University of Novi Sad in Serbia. So Stefan, you have your 5 to 7 minutes to address us.
Thank you, Borislav. I hope that you hear me, and I hope that I will be able to share my presentation, my short presentation. Well, at least I hope that it's short. I will talk about countering disinformation in Serbia and the problem with the institutions who mostly, when I got the call for this conference.
We can see the presentation, so you can continue.
Great. I've heard that the idea of the conference is talking about the access to information, but mostly when we talk about Serbia, the institutions and the officials ignore us, and it depends just on individuals who are working in that institutions, whether they are the soldiers of the ruling party or someone who respect the media and the journalists. It depends on them. Will we get the answer that we raise the question about? So I would just like to make a short introduction about myself, how I got into this story of countering disinformation. This is a picture from my childhood. I was born in 1991 in northern Serbia, and I got into journalism instantly in my early age. I was watching Central News on the public broadcaster every night with my friends Dog Bobby, and my best friend Marko. And then I wanted to graduate in journalism. That's why I enrolled the University of Helsinki. So I was there in Finland learning about journalism and about fact-checking. And there's where I met Professor Karl Heinainen, who was the first fact-checker in Europe, who established the first fact-checking website in Europe in Finland. And he helped me a lot with establishing the fake news tracer or fake news Tragač. And that's why I also finished my master studies at University of Helsinki, where I published my master thesis within this book, Fake News Separating Truth from Fiction, which you can find online. So my daily job today is to fight against disinformation, but sometimes I like to create them, because none of the information that you saw previously in my presentation is true. So this picture belongs to someone who is a little bit more famous than me. That is something that you can check by Google, by using Google or Yandex, checking this photo. This is of course not a dog from my childhood. It is a dog from this movie Babe. This is not my best friend Marko. It is a son of Harry Potter. This is not University of Helsinki, so the flag is added. It is my university at Novi Sad, which I never left for 10 years now and more. This is not Professor Karl Heinainen. This is the Prime Minister of Andorra, and this guy has nothing with fact-checking and disinformation, of course. And I didn't write this book. It is written by Michael Miller, but nothing is easier than, just making this black space and writing my name instead of his. So it's extremely easy to create disinformation, especially in Serbia, when you have support from the government, from the ruling party. If we take a look at the cover pages of our tabloids, they are publishing lies every single day. So we have made several research which shows which showed that we have hundreds of disinformation just on the cover pages of the tabloids with the highest circulation. When it comes to checking those articles, it's sometimes extremely hard because some of or the majority of the articles from those tabloids are uncheckable. So they are using anonymous sources. They are not using a different kind of anonymization of the sources in order to, to give them an opportunity to publish whatever they want and to disable us to check their stories and to disable the audience to check their stories. So what we do, this is our team. It's mostly composed of youth, of my students, because I also work as a teaching assistant at the Faculty of Philosophy. We are writing short analysis. So far, we have published more than 1,200 of them, but to be honest, I think that our impact is not that high, because if we compare our audience at the audience of the websites or the media outlets with the highest circulation or the highest audience, it is like some kind of struggle between David and Goliath. They had like 100 or 1,000 times more people following them than we do. Then we are also doing large-scale research like this one. We were analyzing the cover pages of the two tabloids with the highest circulation, Informer and Srpski Telegraph, or Serbian Telegraph, and we saw that they are announcing some kind of war between Serbia and the surrounding countries once in every 3 days on average, mostly with Albania, Croatia, and Bosnia, but also with the other countries like Hungary, Bulgaria, North Macedonia. So I think that Romania is the only neighboring country that is saved from this kind of discourse.
1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. We are also, you can see some phrases that were used. We are also tracing online scams. So far, we have debunked more than 50 online scams, and we have helped a lot of people who got in trouble by spending their money in some form of scam. We are also trying to watch this kind of connection of media outlets that are spreading disinformation, and to define the fake news factories, different fake news factories in Serbia, and how they are interconnected and overlapped. We are also giving this annual award of Golden, Silver, and Bronze Pinocchio to those media outlets with these statutes and the code of ethics. We are sending them to 3 media outlets that have spread the largest number of this information throughout the year. And we are also doing a lot in terms of education of youth journalists, more than 200 students, more than 400, and we educated more than 500 teachers, teaching them how to use different tools for text analysis, how to use different tools for photo and video forensics, but also how to use the most powerful fact-checking tool, and that is, of course, our brain. This would be the end, but when it comes to fake news and disinformation, there is no end, and I hope that I will be able to answer your potential question after this introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, for this great presentation, and it is good to point out that access to information especially means access to right information. It's not just blank access to blank information. It needs to be a right information. So I now will give the floor to Mr. Altin Hazizai. And given that you are engaged in youth issues for a long time now, it would be interesting to hear your views on what young people can do when it comes to access to information and MIL generally. So you will have 5 to 7 minutes, so floor is yours.
Thank you, Borislav. And I want to thank Stefan actually for his great presentation, and it's challenging somehow. The views we have about the media. I come myself from a very long experience. Since I was 16, I got part of media, but I'm not lying, Stefan. I'm saying the truth. Working for the national public broadcaster in Albania, and later on moving into printed media, working most of the time actually for newspapers who were, you know, positioned with the government. So had the kind of, you know, I felt the pressure, you know, to be against the government and trying also to provide proper news or real news or real, let's say, truthful news. And also I ended up being arrested for 48 hours, and I was put in prison actually in 1996, also for writing articles when it comes to the government work. And later on I moved on TV. And I have to say, I mean, I've seen all the kinds of media and every kind of change that has happened, not only in Albania, but I guess in all the Western Balkan countries and countries in South and Eastern Europe. What I want to raise before probably providing a few kind of recommendations, it's more some kind of concerns that I think is worth to share among us with participants, but also I think that they are very important for organizations like UNESCO or other ones who work or who support media freedom, because these are issues that, at least in my opinion, they're going to get worse before they get better. And the way how the media is being portrayed, the way it is being developing, and the role it's playing, even across the world, even in most democratic states, like if you see USA or other countries, things, let's say the overview, it doesn't look that good. So I think we shall prepare ourselves really for things to get bad before we start analyzing or understanding what will be the new framework that we need to build in order to enjoy a good media, a truthful media, but a media that above all puts the interests of citizens into the account. So when it comes to youth, I come myself from youth movement, so thank you for the introduction. And what I have to say it is that there is probably one of the major concerns we have, and I guess is all over the same in Western Balkan countries. Young people are, let's say, abandoning our countries. And with that, also what is happening, if you see the numbers, whether it is Albania, it is Bosnia, it is Kosovo, it is Serbia, most of the young people, they are not, do not believe anymore to stay in their countries, to contribute in their countries. Most of the young people, they seem to have the kind of perspective that they want to move into a Western European country and they want to build their life in Germany or France or Netherlands or some other country. So if there is any danger that we face together as countries in Southeastern Europe, it is youth, I'll call it abandonment. I mean, I don't have any other word about it. Second, which I think it is even more important, it is one of the threatening factors when it comes to let's say, the whole media, not only to media literacy, but also to the whole independence of media, is what they call it youth media apathy. We see young people across the countries. They don't care anymore if media publishes fake news or real good news. They don't care if our public broadcasters are fully independent or are controlled by the government. They don't care anymore about political processes. They don't care anymore about political parties. So it is only a few, let's say, people who are aware, mostly, this is through either think tanks, either through youth organizations or human rights organizations, that are providing the kind of, let's say, of a small group of interested people, interested groups, who are looking into the issues and are trying to bring a new perspective, or probably trying to build a new framework for a real, for the media. So in that regard, what kind of shocks us often, but I mean, then we need an answer to that, is that even when the fake news are known to be fake, there is a kind of, let's say, enjoyment, a kind of liking, a kind of, or we see the mass distribution of this kind of news from young people, even they know that this is fake, even they know that they might damage the life of some person or welfare of a person or some groups. So there is a kind of neglect from the side of the young people, to provide or share the kind of information that it is truthful, it is respectful, and it doesn't harm. So in that regard, I mean, media nowadays, I'm not saying from all young people, but from a lot of young people, is seen or as a matter of what we call it, becoming famous for 1 minute, or it is a matter of joke, you know, like, oh, I'm disability because it's funny, even if that it could be harmful and damaging. So in that regard, what we see as a concern, has to do with lack of education, lack of that kind of, thank you, of culture that you need to have towards the information itself. And when it comes to that, it means, and this is another work and concern for us, we live in countries where media, it is not free. We live in countries where media, every report that is coming for the last more than 5 years now, it is concerning about media freedom in our countries. So there is a parody, there is a contradiction, and there is an absurdity when it comes to this kind of, what you might call it, kind of catch-22 situation. And Professor Leila said it so well, you know, there is so much availability of media access compared to what it used to be before. But on the other side, most of the information that is being provided, it is not the right one. And in that regard, also, I think what is happening right now, it is concerning, is that there is a lack of access of young people into proper media, lack of training of young people for media role, media literacy. It's producing this kind of consequences as the ones I described before. So if there is any suggestion, and I'll close it here, it has to do with empowerment of young people. And that kind of empowerment, this should be not only simply, you know, to have fake news versus truthful news, which often we see in the discussions nowadays, but it's about building the culture of young people to respect the truth. And I think this is probably one of the lessons and one of the new frameworks we need to believe. And the second one would be to build the culture of respect among, let's say, every human being that nowadays populates especially the online social media, where most of the news and everything else is happening nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Altin. So now we will proceed with Mrs. Alma Fejzic. So she's involved in the activities with youth. So if you can give us a short overview of the potential that, in your experience, youth has in the context of access to information, and how interested young people are, especially for this problem, and do they know that they are depositors of the right to access to information, and that this right belongs to everyone, especially to youth, and not just to journalists. So Alma, you have the word.
Thank you, Boleslav. Dear participants and colleagues, I greet you warmly, and I thank for the opportunity to speak about this important topic. Our experience in working with youth is many years, and from the aspect of one CSO, I will give an overview of the topic, exactly how young people view the media and information literacy and access to information, and what is needed for young people to be more actively involved in these processes. Young people are surrounded by the media on a daily basis, but our experience is that they don't know enough about media literacy, and also about access to information. Because of our complicated state system, we forced with two groups of young people. One of them who tried to get some of them rights, tried to get some information, but they had obstacles, and those who think this is not possible. We believe that they need to have more knowledge, but we have some risks in work with young people. Young people don't know how to critically analyze the information and use media content. They are not always informed consumers and transmitters of information and opinion, and they create opinions very often based on the opinions of parents, other family members, their friends, but not critically. What should we do with young people? How could we involve young people in these processes? Start talking more about MIL policies, about media and information literacy, trainings with youth, but trainings where we're listening their voice, where they are not only some observers, trainings for youth with mission that they transfer their knowledge to others in their schools, other CSO family, give young people a chance to work on policy promotion and respect their opinion. It is most important cooperation, CSOs and government and networking. Young people could be integrated in all these processes through a few steps. Learn them how to make informed decisions, engage them as in lifelong learning, learn them that MIL can be useful for advocacy of their rights, and I think promoted MIL as a good long life tool among the young people. These are some of the suggestions from our CSO. I would like to thank you once more, and for all questions and other suggestions, I will be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. So now we will proceed with Mr. Uglješa Vuković, and he is from Transparency International in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we would kindly ask him to just give us his overview from his experience about some specific cases about problems to access to information. So Uglješa, you can give us a few remarks in 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Borislav. Well, first of all, I would like to talk more about this legal aspect of the right to access information, and to remind all of us that the right to access information has been recognized in leading international documents, such as Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and it has been also recognized in our constitution in Bosnia as a part of the right to freedom of expression. In the Universal Declaration, it is stated that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, and that this right includes not only freedom to hold opinions, but also freedom to seek and receive information and ideas through any media. So this is, I think it's important to remind us that this means that the right to access information is also recognized as a part of the fundamental right. When it comes to Bosnia, as already said, the first Freedom of Information Act was adopted in 2000, and 1 year later, the entity level laws were adopted as well. At the time of its adoption, the act was passed thanks to the strong pressure and influence coming from the international community. At that time, the international community formed the working group in Bosnia, consisting of both international and domestic legal experts. And what was interesting is that the civil society at that time did not have influence on the process. But in the coming years, CNSOs have been very influential in policy considerations, especially when defending the obtained rights when it comes to freedom of information. So at the time of its adoption, the law itself in Bosnia was assessed as moderately advanced, as it introduced, for example, as the rule that all information controlled by authorities should be public, prescribing at the same time a very narrow list of exemptions, which is good. And at the same time, the public interest test, as already said, has been also introduced, which means that the exemption cannot be applied if the public interest test is not undertaken. The public interest test itself implies that in the case of any sensitive information, which is very often when it comes to TI, So when institutions, for example, are considering to treat some information as exemptions due to the protection of national security or privacy protection, that in these cases, within the procedure, the institution needs to apply public tests, deciding what is more important in every case: the right of the public to have the information, to access the information on one side, or the protection of some values such as national security. The public interest test also implies that the institution has to provide you and any person who is seeking the information with solid reasoning when not delivering the requested information. And that's the most important part of these legal institutes. So CNSS in Bosnia are very protective of the public interest test, as this is according to us, that's the most important achievement of the current legislation. And recently also we registered several attempts to dismantle the whole concept of the public interest test by introducing some amendments to the existing legislation. Luckily, this was so far successfully defended by CNSOs and media organizations mostly. What is lacking in the existing legislation in Bosnia, that there are very few proactive provisions or provisions that regulate the mandatory disclosure of information controlled by public authorities, which means that what we need in Bosnia, we need a new Freedom of Information Act or amendments to the existing legislation, separately regulating the obligation of disclosure of a large number of information of public importance, such as budget execution data, budget data, judgments, individual decisions, etc. So we need to move from this reactive transparency to proactive transparency. And for that, we also, as TI, we are advocating for both policy and legislative changes in order to convince the authorities that we need a new Freedom of Information Act with more proactive provisions. So what we would like to see is basically to go from accessing the information on request to have the legal framework that enables citizens to access information freely, not on request, but thanks to the information that are already published on websites of public authorities. And I think that in the upcoming time, we can expect to see some legislative and policy changes in this area, especially because we already have a new strategy adopted that concerns public administration reforms. Bosnia is also part of the initiative of the Open Government Initiative, and this can be used to build up a momentum to advocate for legislative and policy changes. When it comes to transparency in Bosnia, what we also do, and it's important to say, is that we provide citizens with legal assistance. So we provide citizens with legal assistance, which means that we assist citizens when they want to access some sensitive information. And so we prepare for them access to information requests, if needed, also complaints, lawsuits, etc. And very often we also assist, legally assist, when it comes to freedom of information, youth activists or CNSOs that are mostly dealing with youth issues. So I just wanted to reflect on that, having in mind your interest. But that's that in short, and I'm here also for your questions and comments, of course. And thank you once again for your invitation.
Thank you, Grisha. We have, last but not least, Mrs. Emina Dilovic. She's in the field of information science, and it would be interesting to hear from your side about what youth can do in the aspect of access to information and what methods to use to raise awareness of public and especially young people on importance of access to information. So Emina, the word is yours.
Thank you, Borislav. Well, I think it's important to say at the beginning that first, for answering this question, first we need to be aware of what kind of children and youth we are talking about, and what are the dominant ways of information flow and their communication channels. As we saw in this previous video that Monica showed us, that's actually it's social media, it's something that is called dominantly internet culture. It's not radio, it's not television that are dominant anymore. And when we think about them as Generation Z. And the important thing about this is that those new generations, it's not true that they are not aware of their misunderstanding and the disorientation in new media world and information communication technologies, using of them, and etc. They just don't know how to articulate those needs, because that confusion is something that they are used to, because they grew together with the internet. They are somehow connected in a specific way. So to start with, we need to be aware that they can't do everything on their own. Teachers, parents, actually everybody who are included in that process of formal or informal education need to be actually included in their way of understanding and raising awareness of actually what they need in that process. And because I come from Faculty of Philosophy and I finished a librarianship and information science, for me, every time I have a chance to say, I'm talking about the need of cooperation between teachers, professors, students, and librarians, considering, as Leila Tuchula said, that access to information is basic human rights, and besides that, it's professional value of information specialists and librarians. And also in the video, some of those kids said that we don't need a particular time to start with information literacy education. We need to start with the youngest age, and then when those kids come to faculty, that they are already aware of some kinds of problems, some kinds of chances to resolve all of that. And what they can do actually is to participate. It's the easiest way to say, but participation means in this context the collaboration with not only journalists, as we said. Media information is probably their dominant field, but also with other people in that process, including professors, including teachers, including parents, etc. And it's not an easy question to answer, because internet culture is the dominant space of functioning. It's information literacy is maybe a core word, but we are dealing with fake news, with false representation, with cyberbullying, with we are not sure which sources to trust, which of them are reliable, how to use Wikipedia or not to use Wikipedia in education, even if it's public good, and different sorts of questions. And to answer to all of them, children need to be aware that they cannot solve problems by their own, and but on the first place, to be aware that even if they are born and raised in this actually information age, it's not up to them, and they are not born with that knowledge of how to use the right sources, regular sources, etc. That's it.
Thank you, Emina. We are just on time, so we are going up to schedule. So now we will proceed with 15 minutes of discussion, comments between panelists, but I just need to point out that we need to keep a short comments or answers because we need to use just the 15 minutes. So now I give the floor to everyone to comment, to ask a question, or maybe give some suggestion or recommendation based on what we speak about here. So you just raise your hand and I will give you the word. Or raise a cup of coffee, for example. So anyone with some comment, with some question for someone, because if not, I will ask the question. So Emina raise the cap, so you have your time.
I'm asking all of those who are here, what are the ways actually for implementing those projects that are set in the specific time? Can we use them, of course, projects of information literacy? How to use them in long term? Is there a way of implementing those projects that are informal in formal educational ways, schools, high schools, faculties? I don't know who can answer me, because when we talk about those kinds of projects, it's usually short-term thing, short-term activity, and what happens after that.
Okay, anyone have a comment on that or some opinion or answer? Okay, Leila will comment.
Just briefly, well, I think we all agreed basically on how important it is to have a strategic approach. And in terms of media literacy and media information literacy programs in the region, I mean, we have so many different projects, and sometimes we're not even aware how far we have gone from the state of like 5 to 6 years ago, when this was just a new term, new fancy buzzword that everyone was talking about, and barely few people knew what was all about it. So I think that we have started developing a whole concept throughout, especially, for example, in Bosnia, throughout the country. What we have to focus at the moment is really to keep the energy going, so to say, to get people understand the concept well, especially young people who are now in our focus. And second of all, to work much more on being more compatible than competitive in terms of projects, activities, and so on. Because I can really see sometimes this whole competitive idea that it's just a question of media specialists to deal with. It's just something that information specialists are entitled to, and so on. As long as we keep discussing it in such a narrow terms, I'm afraid we're not going to go very far with it. What we need to is actually to broaden the whole concept, to insist more on its public understanding, which would be better. And of course, to be aware that this whole issue of media information literacy is actually a mosaic of different, we all have our small piece of, Lego that we build a house with, and eventually that house will be firmly established and with a nice roof on it. in several years if we continue working together on it. And it's not just a phrase, you know, to work together and to be very, you know, connected in the whole process. It's really something that we need to do in order to avoid spending resources on something that's not useful, or spending time and energy on something that someone else is doing already, and so on. So trying to be compatible and information sharing is also very important.
Thank you, Leila. Someone else will maybe comment on this question, or Altin, you have a word.
I think Leila said almost everything, but from our experience, probably there could be two other, let's say, approaches that we can use. First of all, it is to start educating children from as soon as they start school about the source information. And I'm not saying to enter into the kind of discussions we do, like serious, etc., but to start learning them, first of all, how to express themselves, how to use media as of young people, and what is the role and how that kind of information can play a role into the life of the person or other people, you know. So I think education from a young age is very important. Most of young people, they become, let's say, they're more users of media rather than, let's say, they consume but not produce much of it. So the second probably suggestion would be, let's make young people the players of the media, so they can understand the whole process, the functioning, the roles, and above all, the importance of what does it mean, freedom. I think especially in the case of young people today, they lack the awareness of what does it mean to live in a democratic society. They lack concepts of democracy per se. Things that in my generation, when like I was 17 when the communist system collapsed, for us that was the most important thing they could have. It was the freedom, it was you know, the fact that we could finally speak without fear. Nowadays, this kind of let's say, strong pushing elements don't exist anymore, but we need to learn to the young people, you know, why democracy is so important and why maintaining our freedoms is so important, not only for one single person, but also for everyone else. I mean, in this, you know, ecosystem that we live right now.
Thank you, Altin, for these comments. Does anyone else have a comment? If not, I will ask a question to Uglješa from Transparency, if he is still with us. Yeah, he is here. So I just wanted to share with us maybe some short illustration of some case that was involved in access to information, just to give a vivid picture about the system in B&H. So just to be clearer for our audience, just in short remarks.
Well, there are a lot of cases that we have been dealing with, but to your audience, it's usually very hard to access those information that can be regarded as sensitive, such as information that are controlled by financial institutions, for example, or privatization contracts in case of Bosnia. So in one case that we had with the Ministry of Trade in Republika Srpska, we tried to, we requested the contract copy of privatization of the mall Boska from Banja Luka. And this contract was I mean, the contract was signed between, on one side, Ministry of Trade in Republika Srpska, and on the other side of the buyer. And we wanted to see the whole contract. And we couldn't access the contract because, according to the ministry, this information is it goes under the exemption protection of commercial interests. So in this case, we needed to go in the end in front of the district court in Banja Luka. And after the whole judicial procedure that we went through, in the end, the court decided in favor of TI. And but when it comes to the execution of the court ruling, again, we couldn't access the information because the trade ministry in the end said that they lost the copy of this agreement. And so this is something that happens in practice. So even if you won the case in front of the court, you can be faced with the lack of transparency and with the unwillingness of the competent authorities to provide you with requested information. And this is happening all the time, not only to TI, but also to media workers, to ordinary citizens, to other CNSOs. And it's especially important for media workers, for journalists to access this information, because only if they have this information, they can go further to investigate and to build their investigative, to have their investigative stories. In case of TI, we mostly use this information for further analysis, for also policy proposals that we do. And to us, it is maybe not so important because we can also rely on other sources of information. And but I think for example, media organizations, it's of crucial importance to have this information, but also for the greater public. So I have to be honest that lately we do see some progress when it comes to some basic information, such as, for example, list of employees in public institutions. This information was very often regarded and classified as sensitive by some public authorities, but we do some progress. We do see some progress in this area. At least now you can see who is working in public institutions. But again, it's a challenge to access the information that consists, for example, data such as someone's salary, although this person is working in a public institution. This is still an issue when it comes to accessing information. But I have to be honest, as I said, that we do see some progress, especially when it comes to, for example, state-level institutions, ministries, or those institutions that maybe that have been provided with more trainings from donors or from civil society. So probably it tells us that we need to work much more with institutions to train them on how to enforce Freedom of Information Acts, although these acts they have been adopted almost 20 years ago now.
Thank you, Uglješa. And now we will proceed to the last session. It's a 10-minute session, so I will address some questions from the public. So I will read it right now because we have one question from the public. It's from Yasmin. So thank you, Yasmin, for your question. So I will read it out. Sadly, that Minister Krivic had to leave. However, I would like to stress a question for all of you regarding the responsibility of the governments in favoring market useful sciences instead of social sciences and humanities in particular. In the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Sarajevo, there is no space for engaging young researchers into academia, institutes, etc., which would deal with important social questions that are big and left by aside. So anyone will comment on this? I think Leila, maybe you can answer about position of social sciences in the field of the topic we talk about today.
Well, I don't want to use space so much as sort of a speaker for all questions, but just briefly, I can totally agree that it is important, especially in terms of the whole issue of media and information literacy development in the Western Balkans countries to have precise and reliable data and do a lot of scientific research. And it's also something that authorities should support strongly. International community, including UNESCO, has recognized the importance of research in this field, and we are very grateful to that. But our governments on all levels should also recognize this need to make decisions based on scientific data and scientific research. I must say that all of the projects, scientific projects that I have participated in, were funded by international actors. And it's been widely used after we get such results. For example, youth study that we've been doing, strategic documents that we have been providing through our MIL project at the University of Sarajevo. They have been widely used afterwards by the authorities, but they're not ready to invest in producing them. So we are doing a favor with support of the international community to them to make their policy making and decision making easier, but they are not giving anything in return. And yeah, I kind of get creeps out of the idea that we are teaching our students only to be market-oriented workers rather than being critically thinking human beings who need humanities, who need arts, who need social sciences, and who need a broad education and research in all these fields. I guess there's going to be a way out of the situation right now. Either the governments will have to change the attitude, so we'll have to change the governments. I don't know. These are the only two options.
Okay, thank you, Leila. Anyone else want to comment on this question?
If I may also step in just briefly, because we mostly talk about freedom of information, but I think it's important also to say that lately the whole, the emphasis should be also on how to open up institutions and how to open up all the data that these institutions have and they control. And if we want to enable researchers coming from civil society or from universities to do their research analyses or to come up with scientific evidence, we need to see what kind of data do institutions have under their control, and also to convince them that this data should be seen as public good, and that we need to, so even when we talk about how to open up institutions, there is a need for the change of paradigm. So from reactive transparency to proactive transparency, and to talk much more about the concept of open data. So not only to talk about freedom of information, but also to talk about open data, because there are so many data that our institutions have under their control, and they are not opening up themselves due to I don't know, some probably political reasons, because I don't see that there are technical issues. This can be done easily. You can easily open up any institutions in Bosnia from the technical point of view. If you talk, for example, with technicians, with people who do have capacities to do that.
Thank you, Uglješa.
Could I just say something
yes,
on this,
Borislav?
Thank you. First of all, I wish to say that, the discussion and presentation were extremely, interesting. And I agree also with the colleagues that we should not narrow it to the only, disclose of the information. So we have to be much wider than that. And that's why I invite everyone, to actually, I wish to recall, the SDG 2030 agenda, so because now the governments are more actively reporting on the achievement of the particular SDGs, on the, achievement of the particular targets, and they are using the data which is largely available within the different institutions. And we need to you should use this momentum to extract whatever is necessary and to help the governments to more actively, promote these SDGs and the achievement, until 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Siniša. So I will round it up in the few sentences. Firstly, we pointed out here, directly or indirectly, that the problem with, as we saw today, with access to information is that it is so important that majority of the people don't notice that, because it's not clear, it's not vivid, it's not something that is priority number one in public discourse or media discourse. So that problem can backfire in the way that we recognize today, in the means that young people especially didn't aware of their rights, because the problem is in this region that access to information, as Uglješa pointed out, it's like it's reserved just for the media and some institutions to request information, but young people, especially young people, they don't know that access to information is their right, and they don't need to wait for some media to get some information. That right belongs to everybody. So I can agree that we need to work on education of young people to realize that access to information is not limited. It is important, but it is not limited just for some public information from institutions. It is especially important to know that access to information is also related to access to information in physical way, that everyone needs to have the same right to access the information in the way of the internet or in the classic media, etc. So it's hard to stress out the importance of that. So we need to in the near future to work on that, especially with young people. So I will thank you all for this conversation. Of course, if you have some other remarks or comments, you can write to us so we can have that in mind for future conferences and future webinars of this type. So thank you all again, and we will be in touch for some fruitful discussions on this topic in the future. So thank you all again.